Welcome, everybody, to Hear Me Out podcast and Frank Analysis. I'm your host, Franco, and I'm joined today by journalist and free Assange activist, Christy Doff. How are you doing today, Christy?
I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. So, Christy Doff is going to educate us a little bit more on Julian Assange. She's going to give us some updates on how he's doing, and then hopefully her experience and the work that she's done as an activist and a journalist can motivate all of you to also be more active about what's happening in our country. So, Christy, first let's discuss why the mainstream media and our government went after Assange.
The U.S. government, no matter what WikiLeaks releases, it's always going to be embarrassing to the United States government when they are involved. Now, the mainstream media, it's interesting because back when this started, 2010, I think the mainstream media was more on the side of WikiLeaks and the independent journalism, the scientific journalism that WikiLeaks was doing, that Julian Assange was doing, and we saw that tide turn through the 2016 election. The more liberal-based our mainstream media has become, the more the narrative that Julian Assange and WikiLeaks were somehow involved with Russia and somehow trying to win the election for Trump, I think they really fed into that and helped support that. And so I think you saw a lot of mainstream media journalists sort of step away from WikiLeaks and Assange at that point. Now, when he was arrested in 2019, you started to see some mainstream journalists stand up for him, but not many. Many wanted to make a very clear line in the sand that they are a different type of journalist. If Julian Assange is going to be called a journalist, it's not the same as them. And many would even argue that he isn't a journalist. So we're kind of watching the media shoot themselves in the foot, because ultimately anything that's decided about Julian Assange and this court hearing that's coming up in September, that will impact the First Amendment. That will impact foreign journalists, and it should very well impact U.S. journalists as well.
And what this reveals is hypocrisy, because if I'm not mistaken, the Democrats were loving Assange in WikiLeaks when he revealed war crimes that the George Bush administration committed. And then Donald Trump loved Julian Assange in WikiLeaks when he released the Podesta emails, right? And I think the mainstream media journalists are just really afraid of, they know that what's happening isn't right, but they don't want to speak out because they are servants to the establishment and to the corporations that own them, right?
Exactly. I mean, they're not going to step or bite the hand that feeds them, really. I mean, they've got these cushy network jobs, and many of them have probably used WikiLeaks in some form of their work before in the last decade. And so really, they're going to try to distance themselves, because if they go after Assange, they're going to go after other people. And we've already started to see that with different arrests of independent journalists, and we're sort of watching this tide turn into where the government can now, by way of censoring journalists, affect the freedom of information that we are supposed to be privileged to in this country.
So what was it that led you to become an Assange activist? Like how did that process work?
Yeah, I started following Julian's situation. I mean, I'd had over the last decade paid attention to when it would pop up in the news. I wasn't proficient in it for a number of years until I really started digging into realizing that he was still in the embassy a few years back, and really at that time things were changing for him. The Ecuadorian president and administration had changed over, and things started to get really tense there. And then in early 2018, in March of 2018, he lost his access to the internet. He was essentially gagged in the embassy, and he lost his ability to see any kind of visitors. Even his lawyers were having a hard time getting to him at that point. And so I started following his mom, Christine Assange, on Twitter, and really started to learn more about the situation and really kind of felt a bit helpless. I didn't know how I could help. I wasn't a journalist by training by any means, and really didn't know where I could help. Unity for J started about that time and started asking for volunteers, and that's when I got involved in helping run the social media, and really just kind of working my way around as far as doing anything I could to help, and helping manage different tasks. And then I contributed to the vigils behind the scenes with Unity for J, and really that just sort of escalated me and gave me the opportunity to work with so many people around the world and just learn so much more about WikiLeaks and Julian's situation, and really feel like I was making an impact, at the very least helping educate other people on what is really happening, and even if those other people are just the people in my life.
So the way that they took Julian Assange from the Ecuadorian embassy, did that break any international laws?
Yeah, so the Julian Assange had Ecuadorian citizenship and he had political asylum. And so there are, I believe, treaties internationally on how to remove asylum from somebody, and then also procedures to remove somebody's citizenship as well. So in neither case, the asylum or the citizenship, were any of those policies, treaties followed. He was basically stripped of both, and then the British police were allowed to come in the very same day and arrest him. There was no appeal process. There was no informing him of this decision and allowing him to make a statement of any kind in his own defense. And he was dragged out of the embassy in April of 2019 and has been in Belmarsh prison, which is a maximum security prison in the UK, ever since. And in many of these months since then, he's been in one form of solitary confinement or another.
So they haven't been treating him well. And with the whole pandemic that's happening right now, they should be giving him proper care, like how other countries are trying to give proper care to their citizens. But it seems like they're not doing that for Julian Assange right now, right?
Right. So Julian had a number of health issues before even going to Belmarsh. While he was in the embassy, many of the times when doctors would come in, they would recommend he needed an MRI, he needed dental work, he needed X, Y, or Z thing that they couldn't do in the embassy. And of course, the UK would not allow him to travel to a hospital to do any of those things while he was in the embassy. Add that on top of being in a room, a number of rooms, out of the sun, out of clean air for 7 years, barely getting any exercise, and then eventually solitary confinement within that embassy, all the psychological torture that caused, and physical torture that caused. And then you move him to a maximum security prison where he's in solitary confinement again, not getting the best health care. He was in the healthcare ward for a number of months. So he's already has these pre-existing conditions, and now you add COVID on top of it. And, just like here in the US, I think the UK has undergone some dilemma of how bad is it? Is it running rampant through the prisons? Do we really understand how many prisoners are getting this? Are these becoming hotspots, much like nursing homes and prisons in America have the susceptibility to be? So we've got a situation where somebody who is pre-existing condition, not getting any sort of bail or release that they are giving to some prisoners in different countries around the world, even in America, because of this pandemic issue, and really not allowing him, on top of all this, not allowing him access to his lawyers once again, and access to court documents. And the whole idea of him preparing his defense for this extradition hearing has been laughable, because he's not been allowed to do such.
So when's the next extradition hearing?
Yeah, so the second half was supposed to begin in May, and it was delayed with all of the COVID-19 delays in the UK courts. And so now it's supposed to start September 7th. I don't think a location has been named yet, so we're still waiting to see if this will take place at Belmarsh. Will it take place inside of London? But yeah, the second half, we've had 1 week in February where everything kind of kicked off. But the second half will be more about presenting evidence and having witnesses testify, and kind of getting into the nitty gritty of what these indictments are accusing him of, and hearing the defense's side of things.
So I think that we need to help push to help save him because they're not treating him right now. So how can we help push to help with better treatment on Assange's health right now?
Yeah, this case has really gone from a publisher and a journalist and press freedom to infringing on somebody's human rights, and he's being held without charge. Right now, he's not serving any sentence. He's literally just awaiting extradition, and he's become a political prisoner. And so, really, the best thing I always tell people is they can go to wikileaks.org, educate yourself about what WikiLeaks is first, and the work that Julian Assange has done, and why it's so important, and why that freedom of information is so vital to our society. And really, we are protesting and we are so angry about so many things in the world right now, and rightly so. But we can't know what our governments are doing. We can't know what these corrupt systems are doing if we don't have outfits like WikiLeaks that want to expose them, and can also help keep those sources anonymous and protect them. And so understanding why he's important is I think, the base of it. And then really, no matter where you live, it's talking to your representatives, talking to your friends and family, helping educate other people and explain why this is an important issue, and really pushing, not only in America but in the UK, our representatives to stand up for him as well and help educate them, because they are just as susceptible to the mainstream media's lies and smears that we've all heard over the past decade about Julian and WikiLeaks.
So the mainstream media and the government make the excuse of justifying these actions that they're committing on Julian Assange by saying, he's releasing information that's dangerous for our government, and like it could lead to other countries attacking us. So could you explain to our viewers why is that like BS pretty much?
Yeah, so specifically with the Manning leaks, which is what these indictments are over, many people use the argument that he endangered people's lives, he gave information to the enemy, and really the story that hasn't been told, unless you're well versed in the Free Assange movement, is that Julian Assange was redacting names. Of the four publishers that worked on this together, he was the one that was the most concerned about names and private information of individuals being released, and not wanting those people to get hurt. And so really that argument, I mean, we saw during the Chelsea Manning trial, her first trial in 2013, that the U.S. government testified that they had no proof that anybody had been hurt or killed because of those leaks. And so what we see right now is the United States kind of going overboard with the classified system of making everything classified, and really when you start understanding that and looking into it, how much they classify and what level of classification, what information should we be allowed as citizens, as taxpayers? This is happening in our name with our money.
Yeah.
And these people that we elected, we should be privy to this information too, so that we understand, because we are being fed lies. We're being fed lies about wars. We're being fed lies about why we are still holding space with all these different bases around the world, why our military is doing all these different things. And so really, I think, instead of looking outside at some unknown enemy taking advantage of WikiLeaks releasing information, we really have to look at our government and seeing what the enemy inside our home is and what they're doing to us in our name and with our money.
And that's exactly why we should all know, because it is, we're paying taxes, we're thinking that it's for the best for our country, but instead of our country investing in programs for improving our education system and having a cleaner environment, and having free public college or paying people better, because the income inequality is getting bigger and bigger, they're spending all this money on war And because Julian Assange and Chelsea Manning reveal information that we deserve to know because it's our money that's being spent, they get punished for that. It's pretty much just because the U.S. is getting embarrassed about about what they're really doing, that they punish these people.
And nobody in those leaks, like the collateral murder video, nobody was held responsible for the deaths that took place in that video. All of the things that were released with the Manning leaks, I mean, nobody's being held responsible for that except for Chelsea Manning and Julian Assange, who were really just the messengers of that information.
So I do want to discuss something that I haven't presented here on my channel yet, and that is that an article that was published on the Gray Zone by Max Blumenthal called "The American Friends," which talks about the instrumental role that the billionaire Sheldon Adelson played in the CIA spying on Assange while he was in the Ecuadorian embassy. So could you explain to people what happened there with the spying, which was probably illegal, right?
Right, and so this is something that Julian Assange had said that was going on, and talked about before this all came out. A security firm, I believe out of Spain, was hired by Ecuador, and they were actually passing on this information to the United States. There were multiple cameras and microphones placed everywhere within the embassy. I mean, we're talking even in the women's bathroom, and
Yeah.
people that would come to visit Julian had to turn in their phones. Everything was searched. Phones were opened up. Things were downloaded, and so many pictures of people visiting him, and just very, very much of a 24/7 surveillance on him. We knew the outside of the building was very much surveilled. It was probably the UK embarrassingly spent, millions of pounds on the surveillance outside, and then the police presence outside of that embassy for years. And so what happened in those later years was that there was also spying going on inside the embassy too. And not only just people visiting him, but his lawyers, his doctors, breaking that attorney-client privilege. And really, this could spell doom for the United States as far as their indictments, because there is this other ongoing trial in Spain about UC Global and what happened in the embassy and how that information was passed over to the U.S.
So and they were even like taking samples from like there's a baby, right? And then they were trying to see if that baby was Assange's child.
Yes, and now we know that his fiance has recently come out, and she has 2 young children that are Julian's. One of those babies, I believe, was his child, and so that one of the diapers for the baby was taken to see if they could match the DNA to him, and things like to intrude into his family's life. To what end? And what purpose were they trying to do other than find new ways to torture him or go after his family?
So not only is what's happening to Assange should be very concerning for all journalists, but it should be important for all people. I mean, all people care about something that's political. They just don't know it. So could you explain why this is the biggest press freedom case in our lifetime and why all people should care about this?
Yeah, this has been going on for a decade now, this whole situation with Julian and the United States coming after him. He even knew, I think even before 2010, there was inklings that something was happening as WikiLeaks was exposing bigger and bigger stories. Because we have WikiLeaks with 100% accuracy rate, we have over 10 million documents released. The United States government going after WikiLeaks is the biggest press freedom issue we really have in our lifetime. And we're looking at, years and years of work that is still continuing through WikiLeaks. And really, I can't imagine a bigger story that could impact our First Amendment rights, and that has already impacted our First Amendment rights, because obviously you can be arrested and held in a maximum security prison without charge now. You're essentially, you can become a political prisoner as a journalist, and you can just sit and rot in a jail cell while you await extradition to the United States. We know because of the history of how the United States has treated whistleblowers that he will be tried in the Eastern District of Virginia, and that many people have gone through that and lost. And so we know that when he comes here, if he's extradited, that is going to be a show trial. It's going to be a black box. There's not going to be anyone allowed. The courts have already said as much, that there will be special administrative measures put on Julian and his team, his legal team, so that they can't talk to the press. And the United States has already said that the First Amendment does not apply to journalists who are outside the United States, so foreign journalists. So we're really looking at watching a journalist and a publisher come here, be tried, and then essentially just kind of run through the gamut and then put away for how many years? I mean, he's up to a maximum of 175 based on these 18 indictments already. So I think a lot of people think, oh, if he comes here, you know, he's going to get a fair trial. He can prove that he's innocent. But this has already been set in motion. And as we've seen in the UK courts, nothing that the defense has done has really swayed the judges. There's always this pre-written decision that they seem to pull out and read. And we're really just watching a show. It's so infuriating to try to fight this extradition. And some people think he should just be brought here to prove himself innocent, when we know from our own history in the last 30 years that the United States does not treat whistleblowers well. And you know, we've seen the torture of Chelsea Manning here and what she went through and continues to go through, being subpoenaed and put in jail, and has been recently released again. You know, how long will that be for this time? The psychological torture that's gone, you know, that she's gone through is immense. And so we can expect, because the United States has trailed on for 10 years following Julian, you know, they're not going to let up. Like, they've invested a lot of money to come after him and bring him here.
All right, Christy, I know that your message and your story and the work that you do will inspire a lot of people to be more active. Is there any last things you want to say before we finish this segment here?
Like I said before, go to wikileaks.org, type in your favorite corporation, type in your favorite politician, just see what's out there and read through a few things. I think you'll be amazed that WikiLeaks is not working for Russia. They're not just revealing things about the United States. There are so many countries and corporations and politicians that have had information revealed on that website.
Including Russia.
Yeah, it's quite, I mean, you could spend probably years going through those documents. So educating yourself, I think, is the first step, and understanding the situation and getting impassioned about it, and feeling like it is an important issue for you to stand up for as well.
All right, and then where can people find your work?
Yeah, you can follow me at Christy Doff on Twitter. I also contribute to the Overwritten Report on Dak Rouleau's channel, and I also contribute to D. Pierce SSC on YouTube. So yeah, that's the 3 places you can find me.
All right, there you have it, everybody. Thank you so much for watching. Like, share, and subscribe, but also like, share, and subscribe to D. Pierce SSC and to Dak Rouleau's channel. I'll have that linked in the description. Also, check out the Overwritten Report at overwritten.org. And don't forget to stay informed. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thanks for watching that segment of Hear Me Out. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell down below so you can get the latest on sports, pop culture, and progressive politics. Stay informed.